Hello and welcome to the channel. The Italian peninsula may have thousands of years of history, from the Romans to the Renaissance, but the Italian country is one of the youngest countries in Europe. Today we will be talking about the unification process of the nation, mentioning all the big names and all the big events. Now, if you haven't done so yet, please hit that subscribe button. Let me know what you want to watch in the future by commenting down below, and click that notification bell as well so you know when my next video is out. Now, if you haven't watched part number 1 yet, go ahead and do that first. The link is in the description down below. This is part number 2 of 3 of the Italian unification story. Let's get into this. We left off with a country that wanted to be unified, but the people were completely divided. They wanted different types of governments and couldn't agree on anything. So let's define some of the main players in the unification game. Here we can talk about a person that I mentioned in the first part of this series, Giuseppe Mazzini. Giuseppe Mazzini believed that first and foremost, he was a nationalist, and he believed that Italy was destined to be unified and take its role in the European geopolitical game. He was stubborn and refused compromise, and he wanted what not everyone wanted, and he wouldn't budge on his ideas. He wanted a republic and not a kingdom, and he used direct propaganda to get anyone that was willing to join his camp to free themselves from the yoke of foreign powers. Joining Mazzini was a man born in Nice in modern-day France, but it was once part of Piedmont, Sardinia, Giuseppe Garibaldi. Garibaldi probably deserves a video all of his own in the future. Let me know if you agree by commenting down below. Garibaldi believed in a democratic republic of a unified Italy, and he would be accredited with pretty much single-handedly unifying the north and the south of the country. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. By 1831, the king of Piedmont, Sardinia, Carlo Felice, died as an absolute monarch after ruling for 10 years. His cousin, who was the Prince Regent, Carlo Alberto, was called away from his exile in Florence to become king of Piedmont, Sardinia. After seeing what had happened in the July Revolution in France, he was worried the same thing might happen to him and his country because his kingdom was so close to France. So he teamed up with Austria once again to protect his nation. Then we have 3 more big players. The first of which is Vincenzo Gioberti, a priest and influential individual who wanted Italy to be made up of small states that were formed in a confederation and ruled by the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, as a sort of Holy Roman Emperor. Another big player was Massimo d'Azeglio, who was the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Piedmont, Sardinia, who wanted Italy to be ruled by the Savoy royal family as a united kingdom. Soon he would be replaced by someone called Camillo Benso, the Count of Cavour. And he had a similar idea, but he also used something called realpolitik in a Machiavellian approach to politics, where he would make things happen that he wanted them to happen. Okay, so he would organize things to happen the way he wanted them to. All of these sides of the unification story were heavily divided, but they had one thing in common. They all wanted a country free from foreign powers. And finally, the stage is now set for the unification. Now we quickly fast forward to the 1840s, where Italian nationalist ideas grew deeper and deeper, and in 1846, the Pope Gregory XVI died, and he was replaced by Pope Pius IX, who was somewhat sympathetic to the ideals of the liberals and nationalists like Giuseppe Mazzini and Giuseppe Garibaldi. The same year, there was a bad harvest across Europe, and the European economies were sent into turmoil. 2 years later, by 1848, there was a revolution in France, which saw the French king Louis Philippe be forced to abdicate the throne, and France became a republic. These revolutionary ideas spread across Europe, and most importantly for the Italians, it spread to the Austrian Empire. And the Austrian Empire began to panic, and it weakened its grip on the Italian state. This led to nationalist uprisings And in Milan it was known as the 5 Days, from the 18th to the 22nd of March 1848, where Italian citizens were fighting against the Austrian overlords. They fought from street to street and forced the Austrians out of the city. A group of citizens, not soldiers, had beaten back a garrison of 12,000 Austrians. The Milanese called upon the constitutional monarch Carlo Alberto of Piedmont Sardinia to come and be their king of Lombardy and Venice, as Venice also had their own uprising. The Piedmontese and Sardinian army chased the Austrians to near Verona, where they turned and met at the Battle of Custoza on the 23rd to the 26th of July, 1848. The outgunned and outnumbered Piedmont Sardinian army had dealt the Austrian army a deadly blow, but ultimately the battle ended in Austrian victory. For the next few years, city-states revolted against the Austrians, and there was a mixture of victories and defeats. This is known as the First War of the Italian Independence, and it became clear to all that it might be possible to gain independence and unify the nation, but it would have to be won through spilling Italian blood and foreign blood as well. While the Piedmont Sardinian king was forced to sign a peace treaty with the Austrians, the rest of the Italian states began to falter. Pope Pius IX was forced from Rome by Giuseppe Mazzini and Giuseppe Garibaldi as well, who declared the Republic of Rome in 1849. The very seat of the papacy and Christian power being forced to leave Rome sent shockwaves around Europe, especially to France, where their president, the French president, who was the nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte, Louis Napoleon, decided to send troops to Rome to get these rebels out and get the Pope back in, which is exactly what happened. The rebel, Giuseppe Garibaldi, fled to a city called San Marino, and I'll explain the relevance of this in part number 3. In Piedmont, Sardinia, people were annoyed that they had lost to the Austrians. They had them on the ropes, and they went to their king, Carlo Alberto, and told him to break the peace with Austria on the 22nd of March, 1849, and they went back to war. They met at a battle called Novara, which saw Italian forces once again being outnumbered and outgunned, and they suffered terrible losses. In the presence of his general and his son, King Carlo Alberto realized he was doomed. He called himself a failure and abdicated in favor of his son, Vittorio Emanuele II, in a hope that the Austrians would give him a more favorable terms in a peace treaty, which was signed on the 24th of March, 1849 in Vignale. By 1850, very little had changed since 1815, as the Italian states refused to honor the reforms of the 1848 revolution. But there were some differences. The kingdom of Lombardia-Veneto now found themselves without any autonomy as the Austrians made their presence felt. Rome was pretty much under the French troops who brought back the Pope, and the south of Italy was still under the Bourbon rulership at the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, and Piedmont Sardinia now had a new constitution and a new king, and it gave the king pretty much a little bit more power than a constitutional monarchy would have, naturally. This would see difficulties being grown between two people, the king, Vittorio Emanuele II, and his prime minister, Camillo Benso, who is known as the Count of Cavour. Cavour was a brilliant politician. He was able to be a moderate person. He wanted Piedmont Sardinia to be based on Britain's constitutional monarchy. He was also able to make Piedmont Sardinia extraordinarily wealthy compared to the rest of Italy, especially compared to the south of Italy, who still have a lack of infrastructure compared to the north, even today. Because Piedmont Sardinia was much richer than it had been before, it meant that they could follow a more ambitious policy. You see, Piedmont, being where it was, acted as a buffer state between Austria and France, meaning that neither could take territory from it without threatening the other. So in other words, it meant that Cavour had the power to make alliances with big powers of the day against Austria, knowing that they would not be attacked. This is where we see Piedmont Sardinia joining forces with the British and the French in the Crimean War in 1853, which really helped catapult Piedmont Sardinia into the big leagues of the European geopolitics, and Cavour wanted a seat at the table when the treaty was signed, so he could secure that both the French and the British would help them in the annexation of Lombardy-Veneto in favour of the Piedmont Sardinian kingdom. On paper, this was fantastic, but the British refused to play ball, so Piedmont Sardinia turned to France and their now ex-president, who became the Emperor of France, Louis Napoleon III, who was Napoleon Bonaparte's nephew, to back them up. Now, Louis Napoleon had been meddling in Italian politics for a while. He was even a member of the secret society called the Carbonari. So, he was keen to help, but only if he had the Papal States under his French rule, and if Piedmont Sardinia would accept French guidance, and they would only step in and defend Piedmont Sardinia if the Austrians attacked first. With these terms agreed, Cavour sent Piedmontese troops very close to the Austrian border and made them feel a little bit uncomfortable. By the next year, in 1859, this triggered an uprising in the Duchy of Modena, which was under the overlordship of the Austrian Empire. When this uprising happened, Victor Emmanuel and Cavour quickly decided that Piedmont Sardinia would come to the aid of the people of Modena, and this meant that the might of the French army would be behind them because the Austrians attacked first. Here we can see Cavour using his ideals of realpolitik, making things happen the way he wanted them to. Now, this is obviously the start of the second wars of the Italian independence, which would go on to see 10 battles from the 26th of April to the 12th of July 1859, and they took place around the contested Lombardy region in northern Italy, involving 198,000 Austrians, 128,000 French, and 56,000 Piedmont Sardinian troops. This was a massive campaign. The final battle of Solferino would be the last major battle in world history where all armies were under the personal command of their monarchs, Victor Emmanuel II of Piedmont Sardinia, along with Louis Napoleon III of France, versus Franz Joseph I of Austria. This battle was so bloody and brutal, it even started the international Red Cross movement. Finally, by the 12th of July, the Austrians were forced to sign the Armistice of Villafranca and capitulate to a Franco-Sardinian victory. The Italians were on the up, and they even formed a new state called the United Provinces of Central Italy, which would boast the Italian numbers. Things were looking good for the Italians, but still they had a mighty long way to go. Find out what happens in part number 3 as Italy becomes a nation. I really hope you enjoyed that. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you want to watch next by commenting down below. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and give me a like if you enjoyed the video. The more you know.